You are most kind to clap before I say anything. Dr. Cavadini, thank you for that very kind introduction. And thank you for the invitation to be here this evening to share faith with you, my friends, and to theologically reflect a bit on what it means to be co-responsible in the work of evangelization in the life of our church. With your permission, even without your permission, but with your permission, what I'd like to do is focus that particularly on evangelizing young people and young adults. So let me begin with a personal disclaimer. A very dear friend of mine was an Orthodox Jewish rabbi, and he was a man of great learning, great integrity, one of the finest men I had ever met in my life. And one of the lessons he taught me is something you and I need to remember tonight. In one of the many animated conversations we had, one night in particular about education, he turned to me in the midst of our posture and he said to me, "That's your problem, Frank." I looked at him. He goes, "You want all the answers." I said, "What's wrong with that?" He said, "In the rabbinical tradition, we want all the questions. Because if you ask the right question, you will get the right answer." And he said, "Just look at the Gospels. Jesus and all the..." I said, "Just eat your pasta." So what's the disclaimer? Disclaimer is, my friends, I have come here to ask many questions, and provoke some questions for which perhaps we may not have a full answer. For we are living in what I consider a pivotal moment in the life of our church, where the challenges before us are many and somewhat even serious, but they are the seedbed, the fertile ground for opportunity for us to become creative and imaginative in responding to them, ever, always, and forever faithful to the Catholic faith we share. For the faith does not change, but the circumstances do. So what I like to do is break open this topic of co-responsibility, both as individuals, as disciples of Christ, and as members of his mystical body. So there are three tasks I like to do, and please God, I will do them in about 30 minutes so that your questions can be part of this conversation, this dialogue. And I want to define, if I may, or describe the three key words in my topic. That is, co-responsibility. What does it mean when we speak of it in terms of evangelization, most especially of young people? Secondly, what is it when we say evangelization? There are 1,000 different descriptions. Tonight you get 1,001, okay? And the third is, I'd like to share with you very personally some of the lessons I have learned in an initiative that the Institute was part of, co-sponsored by the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministries, an initiative that is designed to engage young people using the technological platform to evangelize them and call them to community. It's called the Face of Prayer. And I have learned some lessons I want to share with you about that. So let's begin about this notion of co-responsibility. You know, from my days of growing up in Brooklyn playing stickball in the street, when you were the cleanup hitter, it was easy. Everybody set up the stage. Your job was to bring it home. So the three talks, of which unfortunately I did not have the opportunity to listen to, everything you have heard before, has already amply described co-responsibility in so many ways. Please God, I will not repeat that. But what I'd like to do is focus it a bit on this question of evangelization. And allow me to begin by using the via negativa, or what St. Thomas used to say in his dictum, rarely affirm, seldom deny, always distinguish. Or to put it more simply, sometimes it's easier to describe what something is not than to describe what it is. So when I say co-responsibility in the work of evangelization, this is what I am not saying. It is not simply a work of collaboration or cooperation. It is, in fact, an opportunity for us to work shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, absolutely. It is a task to be done. It may even involve projects and initiatives, but quite frankly, my friends, it is far more important and far deeper and far more mysterious than all of that. It is not just, if I could use that word just, an exercise in divvying out responsibilities in leadership. Quite frankly, Pope Paul VI, to Pope John Paul II, to Pope Benedict, to Pope Francis, have been speaking consistently about the need in leadership in the church to open new avenues so that everyone in every state of life can have a meaningful role in what I'm going to call guiding and directing the church in the world. So again, that is a good thing. But in this context, I'm talking about something much deeper, far more mysterious. And I use the word mysterious in a very particular way. Because there is a danger, my friends, in all aspects of the church's life, but even in this work of evangelization, to reduce it just to tasks to be done, and to see ourselves in the different states of life as somehow in competition, which is crazy. Crazy. To define ourselves as if it's only authority and power and whatever that means that distinguishes us is way off the mark. Because when I look at the beauty and mystery of the church itself, I see a great complementarity as different parts of the body, St. Paul teaches us, need each other in a great enterprise. So when we speak of, for example, the clergy and the lay faithful and the religious, what I see is, in my own way of understanding it, is that the ordained state, the ordained exists to help sanctify the church so that the laity can sanctify the world. And our mission is shoulder to shoulder together to bring the world to Jesus, to bring the world and its inhabitants to heaven. And at the end, evangelization is all about getting to heaven. In my mind, it's as simple as that. And the character that animates it is servant leadership, because its foundation is the gift discovered. That is the via positiva. Mama used to tell me all the time growing up as a little boy, if you receive a gift, with it comes responsibility to cherish it, to share it, and to give thanks for it. And as a little boy, she was talking about toys and things, which I had to share with my sister against my better judgment. I'm talking about something far greater than that. Consider, my friends, what the gift is. On the date of your baptism and mine, the Father of all whispered into your heart his Holy Spirit and mine. That we received in grace what Christ has by nature. We are his children. On that mystical day and moment, you and I were forgiven original sin, and if we were guilty of any personal sins, so much does the Father love us and cherish us. We were infused with faith to see what the world cannot see in Jesus as Savior and Redeemer. Hope, which is the burning desire to be one with this Lord in the glory of heaven. Love, to be able to affect his life in the world. There is no greater or more awesome gift than to become a disciple of this Lord who so wildly loves us, even in our faults, even in our failures, even in our sinfulness, that if you were the only person who ever lived, Thomas taught, he would have died only for you. And with that gift comes this profound responsibility as individuals. And what is it? In my mind, it is simply this: love that we have discovered, that has taken our life over, impels us to share it with others. And that love has a face, and that face is Jesus the Christ. That the responsibility we all share, all of us, every baptized member of this church, is in a personal, effective, incredible way witness to the one who loves us, who forgives us, who saves us. And I love that image of falling in love, because we've all fallen in love, have we not, in our lives? And recall the dynamic, the deep desire to know everything about the person we have fallen in love with. The burning, impelling desire to spend time with that person. And who would we not tell about the person who has captivated us and claimed us? And what would we not do for that person, even give up our life? You see the parallel. That's the gift. And therefore, the responsibility is not something I accord you. It's not something we give permission to one another. It's from the very essence of the gift we have received in Jesus Christ. And having said that, then there's one other level I'm going to invite you to come to. And since I've spoken about my mother, let me throw in my father for good measure. My father was an Italian immigrant, good man, religious in his own way of understanding what that meant. Okay? And was as tough as nails. And I have an older sister who I do love very much, for the record. Okay? I don't want to get the wrong impression. But growing up, perhaps you've done the same, we fought all the time. And we fought with gusto. And in an Italian house, right, the arena where you wrestled was the dinner table. So my father sat there patiently, and we would go at it until one was up into a frenzy. And my father would say, sit down, and you be quiet. And then we got the speech. Okay? Same speech, thousands of times. Okay. My father was a longshoreman, so he unloaded ships. So his forearm was the size of my thigh. And he'd roll up his sleeve, and he'd point to his veins, and he'd say, see here? See this blood? This blood in me is in you, as in you. You want to fight? Fight. When you leave this table, you remember we are one family. I was usually the first one out of the table. I tell you that story for one reason. Because as I've grown older, I realize my father is partially right. For we say blood is thicker than water, but grace is thicker than blood. And we are in this room, all the baptized, one family of faith. I am your brother, whether you like it or not. And you are my sister and brother, whether I like it or not. And that is the birthplace of co-responsibility. That we are deeply personally related to Christ, but never privately so. That we complement each other, not in power, but in gifts and talents, and the love that allows you to increase if I must decrease for your good, to quote John the Baptist. That in the end, this family needs to be credible, effective, responsive in the world. And so the co-responsibility in evangelization is to allow, when we gather as the mystical body of Christ, to be relevant, credible, effective, and engaged in each other's lives first and in the lives of those around us to whom we wish to invite into this great adventure of Catholic Christian life. So this great task before us is given birth by the very, very gift itself. So, what is it we are asked to do? What is this task with young people and young adults? Allow me to phrase it this way. Allow me to quote Bishop Barron, probably one of the greatest catechists alive, in a series, Catholicism, where he says the word itself almost defines itself, the Evangelium. It is the good news. It comes from ancient Rome when the emperors would send out messengers, right, to send out the Evangelium. And of course, the irony is that when the emperor said was good news, was not necessarily good news if you were on the other end of his battalions and army, right? For us, the good news is we are loved and we are lovable in Christ. The good news is someone, not something. And it is the infleshing of love in the world, who is God's only begotten Son, who is the heart of this good news that we proclaim. St. Pope Paul VI said it best in Evangelii Nunciandi: there is no real evangelization unless the name, teaching, life, promises, kingdom, and mystery of Jesus of Nazareth is proclaimed. So in the end, our responsibility is to make real, I will suggest, to become a living bridge to every human heart, to glimpse, taste, and embrace that profound acceptance and love and salvific redemption in Christ that was given to us. And we're going to do it one person at a time. That beautiful image of Jesus, you've seen it painted, knocking on the door, Revelation 3:20, no handle to the door. Our good news to the world is it's safe to open the door to Jesus. Sounds simple, but this is the challenge for the modern world. What happens if you don't care to open the door? What happens if it doesn't matter whether the door is opened or not? One last story about growing up. Growing up in an Italian family, expressing our emotions was never a problem, ever. And on my 100th day before ordination, Mom cooked the traditional meal. 13 courses, 5 hours, 3 pasta dishes. After the second one, my classmate turned to me and said, "I need air." Okay. So out we went. And he said to me, "Why are you people screaming at each other?" And what do you mean screaming at each other? We're not screaming at each other. We're talking. He said, "Well, we don't talk like that in my house." Well, I'm sorry for that. I said, but if we were truly angry, you would hear us at the corner. So, as I said, anger was part of life. It was only when I got older that I came to realize, as much as when we are angry is discomforting, the truth is, you only get angry when you care. And when you stop caring, you don't even bother to get angry. And that, my friends, is the great challenge in our midst. It is the challenge of indifference, not caring enough to care at all. It is apathy. And that is one of the root causes among young adults for the disaffiliation from the church. St. Mary's Press had a very interesting study, quantitative and qualitative study called Going, Going, Gone. If you have not read it, please do so. It's very brief. You have. And so the findings are very sobering, are they not? Thank God there's alcohol around. Truth is, it also gives us great hope. Why do I say that? Two findings in particular. Number one, disaffiliation, this rise of indifference, begins at 7 years old in the United States. And by the time young adults, not even adults yet, reach 13 years of age, a good number of them have already chosen it's not worth caring about. Number one. Number two, and this is the key insight, that affiliation and disaffiliation is all about either building up or breaking down a relationship. So again, look to your own human experience. When you and I want to establish a relationship with a person in love or friendship, there are questions in our minds we want answered so that we have assurance that the person is the real deal. And there comes a point where we say, we're in. And the heart then does the rest. Disaffiliation are those questions then, in reverse order, that do not get answered, that do not get resolved, that just hang there. And eventually, when there's enough of them, most people will say, it's too much energy, too much time, I don't get it, I can't figure it out. You just walk away. So, in this work of co-responsibility among evangelization of young adults, I would like to suggest to you, and I want to hear your feedback later, is an essential piece to this is to create personal relationships with young adults where they have the freedom to ask their questions and have the reasonable expectation to have those questions answered. Perhaps not always the way they wish, but in a cogent, relevant, compelling manner, and allows them to continue to ask their questions, to develop a relationship that is almost a living courtyard of the Gentiles that Pope Benedict spoke about. And therefore, your responsibility and mine in evangelization for these young adults is to be what I said before, to be this living bridge, so that whatever is on their mind and heart, before it gets to the point where it is indifference, or even if they have arrived at indifference, to be able to fulfill that, to take the blows, to take the arrows, to sit there patiently and walk with them. I mentioned this at dinner. I'm going to add this just here. One of the major insights that struck me at the Synod on Youth was when the bishops, the Synod fathers, chose the Emmaus story. And of course, we're all familiar with it. And it never dawned on me, my friends, that in the very first portion of that story, when Jesus was listening to those two disciples, presumably young adults, walking away from Jerusalem, Jesus accompanied them, listened to them, and walked with them in the wrong direction. Until they encountered him. And then the fire was lit where our heart's not burning. For he had the full confidence that love would conquer their directionlessness. But he accompanied them for a season, for a time, even in the wrong direction. And in our mutual responsibility, part of the pastoral initiative we need to look at is, are we willing to do that one person at a time? And the second challenge, my friends, is the credibility of the community we form. For we have all been part of a family much larger than us, obviously, this great, mysterious, primordial reality. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. We've heard their voices echo and re-echo through the ages. And now we live in a time where our community is not seen as credible among many young adults for a myriad of reasons, which we can talk about later. Allow me just to offer two. Certainly, the failures and scandals in our midst have revealed that at least a few have acted in one way, betrayed their trust, and once you break trust, to rebuild it is awfully difficult. That failure is there and needs to be dealt with. But there's another, and I'm a social critic. After all, I was born in Brooklyn. It just comes naturally, I suppose. In the technological platform in which we live, this electronic world, there is no longer any need to deal with a already existing community. For technology allows me the ability to create my own that looks like me, talks like me, acts like me, and believes what I believe. And when that exists, and you add on to it social media that becomes militarized, what we have is tribal warfare in our midst, in every aspect of life, including the church. And that renders that beautiful picture I just painted, renders it not credible when we claim one thing and live another. And so part of this co-responsibility is a wake-up call. So allow me to be really blunt. It's for all of us to overcome the divisions that are in our midst so that you do not have these camps, whether they are theological, whether they are liturgical, or whether they are anything else in our midst. For that's not how family acts. Or we live in a time when we are not fully engaging everyone's gifts and talents, no matter who they are. For that's what a family does, calls everyone to task, to share, to give thanks, to cherish. And to find a way where leadership is broadened in appropriate ways, among many other things. It seems to me you can't as individuals in our responsibility to the Lord reestablish the credibility of our communities of faith, our parishes, our schools, our diocesan curia, but we can do it together. That's the co-responsibility that is the obligation that comes from the gifts we have all received. You know, I was a Star Trek fan growing up. Do you remember the phrase, for those of you who are a bit older? Okay. The undiscovered territory. That's where we're going. It is undiscovered, but when it is discovered, I think all that we have been hoping for the last 50 years will blossom in our midst. So that is the task. Now, let me be very personal. This project, The Face of Prayer, it was started about 4 years ago, and its purpose was, as I indicated, was to try in a co-responsible way engage young people using technology to evangelize them and lead them to a community of faith. And it had 3 goals, 3 objectives. First is to remind people to pray. So those who have enrolled get a daily text to pray, one intention, and ask them to pray the Hail Mary. And I must tell you, everywhere I've gone, people will come up to me and say, that's a great thing, because it breaks my routine, and I recognize my responsibility to acknowledge God's presence in my life. And so the intention and the Hail Mary probably takes a minute, but reorients me. And I'm happy to report there are thousands and thousands of people receiving these texts every day. If you're interested, text the word prayer to 55779, commercial. Number 2, this question of disaffiliation. What we did was we went to young people and said, what are the questions on your mind? Hundreds of them. From simple questions to the questions you say, Lord, how could I even possibly begin an answer to that question? and they were videoed, and answers were taped in response, sent to the young person and put on the website for the Face of Prayer. The thought was to eventually create a video catechism that chances are, if you have the question, 500 other people have the same question. To be able to try to reverse some of this inability to get answers to some basic questions. And then the third was to create an online forum to connect young people who are beginning to grow in fire for faith, and then lead them to communities that could sustain them. Now, what's the results? So this is the time when it's humility time. Okay. Number one, the texting function is very successful. But not as many young adults have come up to me as older adults have come up to me. We'll just leave it at that. And therefore, it serves a great purpose. But it hasn't quite hit the demographic I was hoping it would hit. As for the video catechism, the traffic to the site has not been what I hoped, because you need to pull them to the site rather than push the material to those who may use it. And the last, forgive me for putting it this way, but we made great progress gathering an online community to support them. And the refrain we heard over and over and over and over and over again is, where do we go from here? Because they've gone back to their parishes and gone back to some of their communities, and they did not necessarily have the support they were hoping they would have. So what are the lessons that I've learned? Lesson number one, I would like to say that I take co-responsibility in evangelization seriously, and I do try, but my methodology needs to change. In fact, the Face of Prayer was the creation of myself and a few adult lay leaders. And we asked young people to participate. But in what we really now need to do is mentor them and allow them to do this for themselves, to be the creative force behind it. And I've gathered a group of young adults, and they are already taking the bull by the horn, and they are taking it in a direction I never imagined, and I'm sure will bear a lot more fruit than I shepherding it myself. For example, first thing out of their mouth, Bishop, videos. Oh, come on. Podcasts, when we're working out, we're going there on the subway, and they're not. I said, well, can't you just take the audio and make it a podcast? Yeah, sure. They said, if you want videos, use them as tools for catechesis. In other words, send them to catechists and diocesan people and parish leaders and have them folded into their lessons. But they're not going to come to your website. And the last and most important is, and no offense, because I did them myself. You know what? If someone answers our question and you answer it, we'll listen and we'll be respectful. But if someone of our age answers it, you will have attracted our attention. Co-responsibility, I myself am learning in my own ministry. The second, my friends, is this. Technology cannot replace formation. And online communities are a stepping stone to lived communities. If we're going to evangelize young adults, we are co-responsible. We are all responsible for raising the tide of the communities of which we are all members, so that they become truly vibrant, engaged, reflective, welcoming communities of faith that are authentically teaching the truth. You don't accompany someone in circles, you accompany them to the truth, who is Jesus Christ. And young people and young adults are not looking for mediocrity, they're looking for greatness. But they can't do it without a community supporting them. And that, my friends, is the task for every baptized person in this church. We all have different communities. How do we raise the tide? And if I may say this, if it's hard enough for myself as an individual to seek heroic holiness, it's that much harder to raise the holiness of an entire community. But when it exists, it transforms lives. And lastly was the insight that they offered for the Face of Prayer videos, and that is, I've come to understand myself that only the best evangelizers of young adults are young adults. And if we can gather the few in leadership and training and formation and support, like Emmaus, they will do what we, perhaps older, myself older, cannot do. I wondered to myself, those two disciples, when they went back to Jerusalem, what did they do? Chances are they bore great fruit because of the credible witness they provided as young people themselves. So allow me to summarize, conclude. Was it Einstein who said, if you do the same thing in the same way and expect different results, it's insanity? It was. Came from a smart man. No one here is insane, right? No. This is a time of great challenge, but a time of great opportunity. My friends, if you and I can think through this great mystery of co-responsibility in evangelization, if we can motivate every baptized person not to pass it off to the bishop or the pastor or to the lay leaders, but everyone to take responsibility of mentoring, of accompanying, of adding their gifts and talents to raise the community to greater effectiveness and greater holiness, imagine the tsunami of grace. Imagine the evangelical renewal in our midst. Imagine. And since I've come here just to ask questions, in a sense, how do we do this? In the lived experience, I'm not exactly sure. It's a moment of humility. But that we keep asking the question is our ultimate responsibility. Every day of our mortal lives to ask, how can I do this, Lord? And give me the grace to do it, and give us the grace to do it together. Every morning when I get up, the first thing I do is look in the mirror. It's an act of penance. Okay. Because mirrors don't lie. And yet, in my early old age, I've begun to realize that's where evangelization begins. When you look yourself in the mirror and recognize the great gift you have been given and the burning desire in our heart to share it, it is our responsibility to do so and to gather with fellow women and men who believe the same thing. And so my last question to you is this. Are you willing to stand before the mirror, my friends? Recognize the gift, roll up your sleeves with me, and to get to work. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You are most kind. So we have about 18 minutes, 20 minutes or so for questions. Please. Comments. Criticisms. Criticisms. There, the man of the hour. Thoughts? Please, sister.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for a wonderful talk. I'm from the Diocese of Knoxville. I'm the Director of Christian Formation. My name is Sister Anna Marie. And recently I've started an initiative called Young Adult Leadership Formation. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, I'm trying to solicit from them what are the topics that you want and they're not really forthcoming. So in your experience, what are some of the most pressing things that young adults in a type of leadership group would need to know?
Well, that's an excellent question, sister, because I think you could divide up in many different ways. My experience, there are the personal questions, and then there are the faith-based questions. So I think on the personal level, questions of intimacy, questions of friendship, questions of acceptance seem to resonate very deeply in every human heart, but particularly for young adults, because we live in a very disjointed world, right? A very disengaged world, very isolated world. So that would be one. And then theologically, it is all about, I'm going to call them the current issues of our age, where we apply that which we believe, and obviously they're coming with very different conclusions, right? And we need to engage that.
One over here.
Please.
Thank you, Bishop, especially for that moment of humility where, recognizing the young people, ministering to young people is where the Holy Spirit is really going to act. In some ways, at every level of the life of the church, sometimes there's that hesitancy, I'll put it kindly, hesitancy for those who are already, active in this or that ministry or this or that role to kind of step aside so the young can feel, we belong and we're being entrusted. Any thoughts on creating that kind of culture of kenosis where some of us need to self-empty and let the young come in?
That reminds me, when I was a pastor, we are so possessive that if you sat in the wrong pew in the wrong seat, they would tell you to get up, right? That's my chair. Where's your name? That's my chair. In the extreme, to your case, there is this possession, right? And we don't want to let go. This is my sense. The insight I shared about my own experience, the lessons I've learned, do not absolve me of my role as mentor. And I think that's part of what sometimes people misunderstand, is when we say we want young adults to minister to young adults, there will be a time when they will become mentors themselves. That could happen very quickly, and maybe for a long time, but they will need mentors to help them. So it's not so much we're giving it up, but that we are taking one step back so that they may grow. And not having children myself, for the record, but I can't imagine a parent having a greater sense of joy than to see a daughter or a son blossom as you kind of recede, right? So it's the same thing in the spiritual world, I think. So sometimes they think it's all or nothing, but it really isn't all or nothing. And maybe we need to articulate that better. I think one of the great insights of the Synod on Youth is this idea of mentoring, which we haven't really explored very much in the life of the church. Professionally, in corporate world, and in government, and in education, it's very much a piece. We need to figure out how to do that as well. So I hope that answers your question. Other thoughts, please. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one back there. No, and then we'll come back to you. I'm sorry. I should behave.
Bishop, thank you so much for your comments. And I'm a campus minister at Purdue University, and I've been in campus ministry a long time. And I would say something that I learned from residence life on university campus as a RA was our resident director made us come in weekly for one-on-ones. And probably 25 years ago, I started telling my student leaders, if you're going to be a student leader in this ministry, you are going to show up for a one-on-one. At Purdue, we have a lot of student leaders and not a lot of staff. So I meet half an hour every other week with students for a one-on-one. And in that one-on-one, I ask three things. Number one, as a human being alive in the world, how are you? Now, at Purdue, there's 44,474 students, we were just told a few days ago, so I'm sure of that number. And
Wow.
people never ask students, as a human being, how are you? And many students, just that question alone moves them deeply. And the second question is about what they do with us or for us. So some students just come in because they have a question. So you say like, oh, what's your question? But if they're a leader, you say, hey, how's Purdue Catholic Women going? Or something like that. And then the third one is, what can I pray for you? Because if they're not honest in the first two, they always are honest when you ask about the prayer question. And students really respond to that. And everyone on our staff does those one-on-ones, everyone. And the students who refuse to come in, because we're not going to go drag them in. We're not a Catholic college. We're a state college. So we don't have that kind of accountability that we can require. But the ones that don't come in, they notice that they're not as close or they're not as part of things. And I can't emphasize enough, I guess, that I appreciate your sense of that need for that one-on-one conversation to allow students to ask what they need to ask, to know what they need to know. And I just want to encourage you to keep encouraging people to take that time to do that ministry. It is exhausting. Purdue is a big place. St. Tom's has a lot of student leaders and a lot of students. And I spend almost all day, every day, meeting with people, one by one by one by one by one. But it makes a huge difference.
Thank you for
So
sharing
thank
that.
you
Thank
so
you
much
for your
for
work. Yeah, tremendous. May I just add one commentary building on your observation? My sense is, in disaffiliation, unresolved questions, it's not just an intellectual enterprise. I have the image, when we're little children and we want the attention of our father or mother because we have something to say or something to share or something to ask. And you always have, when you see it in movies, where the little child's ignored. And that leads to a conclusion that then maybe I'm not worth your time. I think in the one-on-one ministry, in this response, the answer is not as important sometimes as the time spent, because you're validating them. And then once you validate them, then you can actually have a discussion of whatever intellectually or theologically is the issue. It's the validation question. The greatest challenge, I've said this a number of occasions, I'll say it again today, you may disagree, I would welcome the disagreement. In my humble opinion, the greatest challenge young people, young adults, and growing numbers of people of all ages, the greatest challenge they face in our world is that they do not believe they are lovable, and they do not believe they are effectively loved. And if that is the case, if I am even partially correct in a religion that's based in the revelation of love, God is love, it becomes a myth. It becomes a myth. And that's the great challenge in our midst. And therefore, if there's 44,400, how many? Whatever it was. 44,000. So we need 500 more of you. Seriously. So that's the co-responsibility piece. There's a whole segment of our church that's very happy you're doing it. That's great. But what about they doing it is the issue. Other thoughts? Please. Oh. We'll come back to you. I'll come back to you.
Hi. Thank you, Bishop. So I will admit that I'm a junior here at Notre Dame, so I might be one of these disaffected or disaffiliated youth, personally. So my family has always gone to church every Sunday for a long time, but recently I found myself kind of staying back, and it's not really out of some kind of, theological dispute that I have, but I feel the more I go, it's more just kind of going through the motions, and I don't really feel that sense of so I'm Orthodox Christian, there's a great deal of ceremony involved, and when I was younger, I'd go there, and it was like, wow, this is a very significant, profound event. But then as I went more and more, and I got more and more familiar with it, it wasn't really it became more something to do for 3 hours every Sunday, and not really something that you go and experience and then come back and really have that revelation. And I know you were talking about the intention and the text message. So how do you kind of avoid kind of the religious aspect of it becoming just like going through the motions or just something you do, and make it more like a profound personal experience to each individual person. Because I think that could be very productive. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for your honesty, right? And allow me to offer you these words of hope. In so much as I think there's not a person in this room who has not gone through that rite of passage that you are going through. Because those of us born into the church and baptized as infants are given this great gift. But there is a need also, and therefore we believe it's so effective, right? Grace has an objective reality in our lives. But there is also a need as we grow older to appropriate it in such a way that its power can be unleashed in our lives. So I went through that in my life, just as you're describing. And look at me. But I think if and we could talk offline, everyone needs a companion to talk about the desires of the heart, to be able to light the fire. It's not a mistake. The first words out of Jesus' mouth in the Gospel of St. John was a question to the disciples. What are you looking for? And we all ask that question. It's companionship in faith can help raise, could be of help. Could be of help. But I think almost everyone has gone through that phase in one time or another in their life. Other thoughts? This gentleman here in the blue.
Which person?
Right here.
First, I want to thank you for, as Pope Francis says, smelling like the sheep. I could tell that you're actually engaged with your diocese and your people. And I've seen a lot of bishops completely disengaged, to be honest. That being said, I think it's a matter of formation. It sounds like your family really formed your heart to see with our Lord and to act with Him. And I guess that gives my two-pronged question is one, what is being done in seminaries to form the hearts to really have the priest's care, or the future priest's care? Mm-hmm. I've known a lot of seminarians in my life. I used to be in formation, and I studied with seminarians as well. And a lot of them are all in their head. And they do these things to check off the box of the plan for priestly formation and their own ratios in their own communities. And it seems like they're just checking off boxes. And there's a number of them that really do care, and a number of them are really with the people. So what's being done about that? And maybe you're not going to be able to answer the question, but I think it's an important question because you're encouraging us to ask the right questions. I think that's number one. Yes. And then number two, if it's a formation matter, what are we doing to form all the people of God in that manner as well? So formation, I think, is key for both the priests and the laity. And quite frankly, I don't think anything's happening significantly for the laity as a whole in small Christian communities, at parishes, to really form the hearts to see with our Lord. So what is being done is my question.
And it is well, thank you for asking the questions. They are global questions for which I cannot give you like a global answer. But you used a phrase which is very interesting, and it strikes a chord in my heart. To engage the heart is actually, in my mind, unlocking the transcendental of beauty. You know, from the ancient times, the Greek philosophers, and of course Thomas himself, speaks of truth, beauty, and goodness as three transcendentals, three privileged ways to encounter the presence of God. So when a seminarian is all in his head, that means he only has 1/3 of the equation. That the second piece, which is unlocking the power of the heart, the affective response, is through beauty, which is prayer, poetry, music, literature, art, architecture, pilgrimage. It's an engagement of more than just the mind. And then goodness is the virtuous life, which winds up in service. So if you're going to be a man of the people, in my humble opinion, all three have to be unlocked for it to be genuine, for it not to be a show, not to be a crowd pleaser, to truly engage in people's lives. So if I could reinterpret your question and say, is seminary formation unlocking all three transcendentals? It's an interesting question, and I don't know the answer to that question. But in my mind, it should, it must. For the same thing for all of us who are, and for the lay faithful, its formation can't just be intellectual, it has to be also of the heart, and it has to be of the will. We have more work to do then. We have a lot more work to do. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
Maybe one more question.
And then, by the way, if you have other questions, I'll stay behind.
I'd just like to first say thank you, Bishop, for your talk. It was very insightful. So I'm a first-year student here at the University of Notre Dame, and I'm also currently preparing to be a mentor in faith for the Notre Dame Vision program. And so I have a question about how, as a young Catholic, how I can better encourage other young Catholics to kind of see that their call to that co-responsibility to assist in the evangelization of other youths. Mm-hmm. So what advice would you have on encouraging other young Catholics to kind of pick up that responsibility?
That's an excellent question. And I'm not exactly sure the answer I'm going to give you is going to make all that much sense. So I'll stand corrected. But I don't think the way to approach that noble cause is to make it a task to be done. I think you will help others by just being you, by striving for as authentic a life of integrity and holiness as you can, even with your failures. There's a bright light to holiness, even when it is not complete yet, that attracts, that reassures, that loves in a way that nothing else does. So you're already a mentor. You're already engaged. You're already involved. So my advice to yourself and all of us, no matter who we are, is continue to develop your relationship with the Lord in the inner room of your life. Seek him out in truth, beauty, in the goodness of the world. And you will be amazed how many young people are going to follow your example. And you'll achieve what the Lord is asking. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
So friends, we've come to the end of the hour, and that means our only remaining responsibility is to thank our speaker.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.